Hello everyone, my name is Dani. Welcome back to my channel Current Chapter, and today I'm gonna tell you the best books I read in the last few months. So let's talk about books. So in July and August I read a total of 22 books, and I didn't do a wrap-up for July and I still haven't done one for August either. So I wanted to do this a little bit different to make it more entertaining, I guess. And I split all the books that I read in the best books and the worst books. And this video is about the best books I read in July and August. So there are 14 books in this list of the best books I read. So let's start, because it's a lot of books to talk about. The first book I read in July is in the list of the best books, and it was Dragon's Lair by Duncan M. Hamilton. This is an arc that I got on Goodreads, on a giveaway on Goodreads, and it was so much fun. It's an adult fantasy, and it's very short. It's one of the shortest fantasies that I've ever read. It's a trilogy. It's the first book in a trilogy, and it's about a world where for a long time there were no dragons, but right now one of the dragons that was thought to be dead wakes up after 1,000 years, and things are going really bad from there. It's a lot of fun. It's very action-packed. You don't get a lot of character development, a lot of character backstory. It's not about that. It's not the idea of this book. It's really just about the story and the plot, which is something that I really like. So I enjoyed this book a lot. I really recommend it. The next two books are going to be released in the next 6 months, maybe. It's not going to take a long time, so I really recommend that. I know he has other books in this universe, so maybe that backstory, that the story of the world and all, it's on the other books, and I am super interested in reading the other books, but in this one we didn't have that. But I don't think it was an issue. I think it's sometimes you just need a book about dragons and dragons' lairs, and it's fine. So the next one I want to talk about is actually a trilogy, and it's the Hunger Games trilogy. I listened to the audiobook for all 3 books of the Hunger Games, and I had read them before a long time ago, and I had never reread them until now. And because there's a prequel coming out next year, I am very excited about that. Hunger Games was one of my favorite books, and I wanted to reread them, and they are still one of my favorite trilogy. The world is so well constructed, and it makes so much sense, everything that's happening inside the world. It's just amazing to see everything developing. I did enjoy the last book less, as for the last time that I read, but the first time I read it, I didn't like the last book because, okay, that might be a spoiler, because it doesn't have something that the other 2 books have. And this time I didn't mind that part so much. I just didn't like it because I felt like some of the characters were not consistent from what they were in the first 2 books. But the last one was still 4 stars. The first 2 were 5 stars. They are still some of my favorite books, one of my favorite trilogy, and I really recommend it. And I really recommend the audiobook also. It was really a great way to reread this 3 books. Next book I want to talk about, I didn't know exactly in which category best or worst to put, because it wasn't a best book, it wasn't a worst book, it was just a neutral, but it wasn't, I didn't dislike it, so I put it in the best books, and that is The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. So I had never read that. I don't know, it's not a thing really in Brazil, at least it wasn't when I was a child, so I had never read. I knew I knew the characters, but I didn't know the story at all. And it was a lot of fun. I thought it was just a lot of fun. It's a children's book, and I enjoyed it a lot. The next book in my list of best books for the last 2 months is The Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena. This is a thriller. The story of this book is that there's a couple who goes to their neighbors to have dinner, and they leave their baby in their house, a couple of meters, is not very far away, and they have the baby monitor, but when they go back, the baby's missing. And that premise of the book happens in the first 3 pages, maybe 4 or 5. And that was one of my favorite parts of this book, because usually in thrillers, you know the premise, you know what's going to happen, and it takes too long for that to happen. Like, I already know that's going to happen. Why is it taking that long? And that wasn't the case here. I thought it was so... like, the plot twist took me by surprise, and it was just so much action all the time. When you think that something's solved and you're like, okay, so what could happen next? There is something that happens next, and you're like, okay, how are you going to solve this now? So I had a lot of fun. I didn't like the last tiny bit of the ending of the book, but like the last page or so, but it's fine. The main part of the book I loved, and I really recommend, if you haven't read this yet and if you like thrillers, it's an amazing one. The next book on the list is Marina by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. He's the same author who wrote The Shadow of the Wind, which is a very famous book, at least here on BookTube. And Marina is a young adult horror thriller. It's more of a horror story, and it's very unique. It is translated from Spanish, and it's set in Barcelona, which is like already a different setting that you don't read a lot. And the story of the book is that Oscar finds this weird house, and when he's exploring the city, and he eventually meets the girl who lives in the house. She's called Marina, and her father, and they create a bond, and they create a friendship, and Oscar and Marina start exploring Barcelona, and we go with them to explore different places of the city, and they find out about this history that happened a long time ago, and they just want to know why, where, who, when. And they visit a lot of different characters who tell their version and a little part of the story, so you start like putting all the pieces together. And there's also that relationship of Oscar with Marina and her father. And just there's a lot in one book. It's like 2, maybe 3 stories in the same book. And I thought it was very interesting, and it really grabbed my attention, just because it's very creepy and it's very atmospheric, and I really recommend it. If you want, it's not super scary, but it's creepy and it's spooky. If you want something like that for Halloween season, I really recommend that. Next book I want to talk about is Dear Joelle by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a nonfiction story. She tells in the beginning of the story that a friend of hers was pregnant with a girl, and she asked her for tips on how to raise a feminist. And so she wrote this whole book with 15 suggestions on how to raise a feminist child, mostly feminist girl. But those are tips for everyone, really. And it's absolutely amazing. It's not something that I didn't know. Like, all the things that she talks about are things that I already knew, because it's feminism. I know that. I already believe in that. I already agree with her. But the way she talks about it, some examples that she gives, is just so impactful. And I really recommend it for anyone, even if you're like, okay, I already know everything about feminism, read it. If you're a feminist, I'm sure you're going to appreciate the way she told the story. And well, it's not a story, it's the 15 suggestions, but the way she tells it and the way she talks about it is just, it's amazing. I read the ebook from the library, and I really want the book right now in my shelf, just because it's just things that you have to keep in mind always, and it's good to have a reminder, I guess. Next book in the list is a different one. I already talked a little bit about it on my book haul, but here it is in my wrap up. So this is Journal 29. This is an interactive book game. That's what it says here in the bottom. And it's basically a puzzle book, an interactive puzzle filled with riddles that you have to solve. I found out about this book in an Instagram ad, and it was just so weird and different, and we love puzzles, we love solving riddles, so we really wanted to try it, and I really recommend it. This is so much fun. So much fun. So each, let me try to find a page that we didn't write a lot. Okay, so each page has a riddle. Like, this is a riddle. Okay, this has a lot, but just so you get a glimpse, this is a riddle. Another one. So they all look very different, and it's all I don't want to show a lot because we wrote in the book just trying to solve the things, so the answers are all here. Don't try to look in the video for it, but it's just, it doesn't have a story. It tries to have a story, but it doesn't, which is the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars. But if you like riddles and games and puzzles, this is 5 stars already because it's a lot of fun. A few of the puzzles are a bit repetitive, but there are 63 different puzzles. Like it's hard not to be repetitive, I guess. But they're a lot of fun. It's not too hard. It didn't take us too long to finish this. And we already bought the sequel to this one, which is called Journal 29 Revelation. And that one is way too hard. We're still working our way through it because it's just so crazy hard. But this one is a lot of fun. If you can do it with someone else, just think together, try to do that because it's a lot of fun. But even if you're just doing it by yourself, it's challenging and I really recommend it. Next I have The Marrow Thieves by Shahidi Malin. This is a book about Native communities in Canada. So the author is part of that community, and we saw her talking in the Montreal YA Fest, and we were so captivated by the way she talked that we really wanted to read her book. And this book is about it's a speculative fiction about a future where people lost the ability to dream, but the indigenous community still has that ability, and the other people believe that that ability is in their bone marrow, so they're hunting down native Canadians to basically kill them and get the ability to dream back. So it's very hard to read. There's a lot about the culture that I really love to read about. There's not a lot that happens in the book, which is something that I usually like books, like I said, that are more action-packed, and this is not the case. You learn about each of the characters, you learn their backstory, where they come from, what their own culture and how they grew up, what that was like for them, and that was the beauty of this book. I really recommend if you're interested in learning more about these communities. And it's just it's a short book. It's easy to read because it's short, and it is a fiction, like a fantasy novel, but it's also hard to digest some of those things because we know that those communities are in danger right now, and they have been for the longest time. So you know that some of that is not all fiction, so that's the hard part, but I really recommend it. It's very fascinating. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Two Night Owl from Dogfish, which is a young middle grade contemporary about 2 girls who find out that their fathers started dating, and they want to send the girls to summer camp so they become friends. And they don't want that. They are both of them are very good friends with their father, and they don't want anyone else in the family to disrupt that. So they start to make plans, kind of like a reverse Parent Trap thing. They kind of start to make plans on how to not let their dads date. And of course, as you can imagine, they talk a lot and they become more and more friends as it goes. I listened to the audiobook, and its full cast is amazing. The performances of the actress who play the girls are amazing. You can hear so much personality behind their voices. I really recommend the audiobook. The only tiny thing that I really didn't like about the audiobook is that they exchange emails mostly, and in the beginning they reply to each other email. So the subject of the email is re this, and that goes on for, I don't know, maybe like 60 re, and they repeat all of those. So that was very annoying, but eventually that will stop. If you listen to the audiobook and that's annoying you, I'll just let you know that eventually that will stop. And all the adults also have their own cast, and so I really recommend. I love audiobooks when it's full cast, and that was a really good one. The story is adorable. It's so cute, and it's just a lot of fun. There are only 3 more books to go, and they were 3 of really the best books I read in the past few months. So first one is it's a thriller, and I had the ARC from NetGalley, but it was already released, so I also got the audiobook from Scribd, and I switched between them as I read. And that was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. So I will give you a spoiler now. There is another Ruth Ware book in the worst books I read video, so look out for that. But this one was amazing. The story of this is that there's a woman who's hired as a nanny to take care of three girls. 4? There are a lot of girls. And she goes to Scotland to this cabin that's very far away. The most interesting part of this book for me is that the parents of the girls they're architects, and she kind of like jokes that they have to test all the technology before they put in a client's house. So the house is all wired and technological. Everything works through an app or through a screen, or like there are like screens on the wall to control the whole house. So I thought that was very unique, because usually when you go like to a remote place, it's an old house, and this is an old house, but it's also very technological. It was a lot of fun just to have that aspect in the thriller. But the story is, it's very creepy. There's a few things that are very horror-like, and I don't remember much how graphic they were, but I remember like feeling that they were very, very creepy, and not just thriller, but like an actual horror story. But if you like thrillers, if you like horror novels, I really, really recommend it, as it was one of the best thrillers I've read in the past few months, and I was really needing that. The last 2 books are 2 sequels. One sequel to one of my favorite books of the year, and another, I guess it was also one of my favorite books of the year, just don't remember because it was the second book I read this year. But this is Waking Gods by Sylvain Novelle. It's a sequel to Sleeping Giants. It's a trilogy. The trilogy is called The Themis Files. And I'm not going to talk much about what this book's about, because spoilers about the first one. But the first one tells a story about a girl who falls in a hole near her house, I think. And she falls in a giant metal hand. And when she grows up, she ends up working for the people who are researching that metal hand and trying to figure out what that is and what it's doing there. And I think this is better than the first one. I don't remember the first one being so thrilling, really. This is a sci-fi, it's not a thriller, but I don't remember it having that impact on me. The ending of this book is crazy. I really need the next one, but I don't have it yet. But yeah, really, really recommend it. The audiobook is also full cast. I read the first one in audio, and I remember liking it a lot. This one, I started once, and I didn't get into so much, but the physical book worked for me. But I've heard amazing things about the audiobook also. And the last book on my best, which is it is a book that is definitely going to be in the best of the year, in the end of the year, and that's Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. This is the sequel to Nevermore, which I don't stop talking about, and I'm gonna add this book as books that I won't stop talking about because it's amazing. If you like middle grade fantasies, it's just so much fun. It's so whimsical. The characters are so amazing. It's so funny. The humor in this book is awesome. There's a lot of new characters in this book, and they all have different talents. I don't remember if they're called talents, but kind of like powers. And they're all a lot of fun. I don't know, I really love, and this is in a school setting, so if you like school settings, they go to classes, you see professors, and that's always a lot of fun, especially with children learning all the new things that you're also learning with them. I always like that when I learn the things with the characters and not like they already know everything and I have to learn the things. So this one was all new for everyone, and I loved it. I really recommend. If you haven't read Nevermore, if you like fantasy books at all, read Nevermore and then read Wondersmith. I don't know which one was better, honestly. I like both of them the same. But yeah, really recommend it. And those are the 14 best books I read in the past 2 months. As you might have guessed by what I said this here nonstop, I do recommend all those books. So go pick them up. If you want to know more about any of them, let me know in the comments. Let me know which ones you read already and which ones you want to read still. I would love to talk more about these books with you because they're great. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss the video about the worst books I've read in the last 2 months. I have them right here. Some of them will be a little bit controversial. I'll already say that. But I'm excited to make that video as well and talk more about those books and why I didn't like them so much. Because maybe you will like them. Maybe you've already read them and you love them. So remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And thank you so much for joining me. Bye!